great pleasure and honor for me to be here with you today. And actually, it's my first time in Zagreb, and I was walking the other day through the streets of the city in the old town, and our very nice guy told us old stories about the witches. And in a way that reminded me that I have a belief as a therapist that a part of us is doing magic sometimes. And in a therapeutic process, we may just need to let it work to our benefit. And I will show you in the next slides how my client is doing her own magic. First of all, as a structure of the presentation, I will present you a general description of the case and the history. Then we'll go into the NLPt approach and interventions and what kind of work we have done. I'll also have some other therapeutic considerations, ideas that I used in my work, and then in the end a little bit of the future pace, because the process is not over yet. So, the general description. Well, there's Katie. Of course, names are modified, they are not real. I met Katie about 5 or 6 years ago while I was a trainer for a student organization. At that time, Katie was 22. I did not remember her, but she contacted me last autumn, saying that she wanted to start a therapeutic process. So she came to my office. She looks like a strong young woman with very much taking care of herself, at the same time in a very casual way, comfortable way. This is relevant later. She is very successful professionally, working in fast-moving consumer goods company as sales and marketing, and she's very proud of it because her position is a little bit above the sales positions, but a little bit below the marketing. She had some previous diagnosis with HPV and shingles. Well, her main concern was that she was in a moment where she had just finished a relationship and enters a new relationship, but she cannot get over the previous one. And the first things that she says about this dilemma of hers is that the previous relationship with, let's call him Tom, was a very passionate 2.5 to 3 year long time. And in the meantime, they split up and got back together on and off for about 30 times. And every time they split up on her initiative, because he was actually officially involved with some other lady. And the final split was when he said he will get married to that lady. So Katie said, okay, this is enough, so we are done. And they were done for a month, but then she meets Billy, who is a very nice guy. She describes him as tender and gentle and polite and caring, but somehow there is no spark between them. And she likes the affection that he offers. On the other hand, she misses very much the passion and some other dynamics that she had with Tom. So here's the therapy initial goal. In this presentation, I included 16 therapy sessions with NLPt and 1 with EMDR. The therapy is not over. At this moment, we are a few 2 more therapy sessions were conducted after I drafted this presentation, but now we are in a break. So, I'm going to present you now her life history in a timeline manner. It's all facts that I gathered during the 16 therapy sessions. So, first of all, from birth to the age of 3, Katie remembers herself as happy and resourceful, like any little girl of 3. Then something happens, and between the age of 3 and 7, she has no memory whatsoever about what happened to her, except that she was beaten very much by both the mother and the father, especially the father. At 7 years old, there is a memory, a very powerful traumatic memory that she has of her father beating her with a leather belt. Well, I guess it's a pretty classic image, you know, pants down, butt naked over the knees of the father and the belt. From this moment on, she remembers she's already in the elementary school. Actually, this traumatic moment happened in the first class of elementary school when she was not doing her homework. So the reason of that beating was, I don't want to do my homework. So this was the correction that she received. And from that moment on, she actually started having extraordinary results in school, which she kept until the present day. At the same time, she was very fearful, and she was afraid every time when there was a meeting between teacher and parents, that parents would come home with some bad news and would beat her up again. So she developed a strategy that whenever she knew those meetings took place, usually in the evening, she would go to bed very early, like 6 in the afternoon, and pretend to be asleep, just to be sure that when they got home, they would not beat her up for some reason. Although it never happened. I mean, the beatings did not happen ever after those meetings at school, but with any other occasions. There was a guardian angel during that time, which was the mother's mother, the grandmother, who was there when the parents were not. So this was also important. So basically, here we have a very little girl, very afraid of being beaten, and the one who is developing good strategies to cope in real life. And then at 10 years old, the physical abuse stops with another traumatic event, actually. She knew that she had to be home immediately after school. So she decided not to. She wanted to spend some time with her friends. So they took a detour towards home. So she was late at home. She knew that something bad is going to happen, but she did it anyway. At home, the mother was expecting her, was waiting for her in front of the block of flats where they lived. So she grasped her and pushed her in the elevator and slapped her once, moment when Katie wet her pants. And they got at home and the father was waiting with the belt. And he said, well, Katie, before we do this, let's have a chat, sit down. And she said, I cannot sit down. Why? Well, look at me, I'm wet. And then he was saying, wow, this girl is too sensitive to be beaten. So from that moment, the beatings stopped. In reverse, they went on with her brother, but that's another story. So we are here in the middle elementary school. At 10 years old, she switches schools because of her extraordinary results. So in the new environment with new kids, they start well, abusing her. So she's bullied because she's very shy, of course. She's bullied because of that, and she's also bullied because she is very good in school. So somehow at this point she gets into doing some taekwondo, which is a martial art. So she is able to start hitting back. So this is the moment when she starts defending herself, but more than defending, she starts bullying some other kids in return. Another thing important here is that Granny is out of the picture because a new baby in the family is born, so she wants to take care of the other sibling, it's a cousin of Katie. So instead of the fear and anxiety, which somehow is maintained, she develops a huge void inside and a strong feeling of loneliness. She really feels alone. At 14 years old, she goes to high school, and this is a moment when her father tried to beat her again for some reason, but she has the courage and the training from school actually to stand up to him and confront him, and that was basically the last moment that she remembers when she had any confrontation with the father. High school is pretty okay for her, meaning that she continues the same academic endeavor and so on. The feeling of void is getting stronger and stronger, and she copes with it by eating a lot of sweets and playing online games. Basically, she's so smart. She said that during high school she played online games for 6 to 8 hours per day, and in spite of this she had straight A's. Well, life is still not extremely well treating her. At 17, her mother gets breast cancer, and she's taking care of the mother in the hospital for a year or so, until the cancer gets into remission. Then she goes to university, and at age around 20 says it was the best time of her life. It was the time when I met her in the student organization. And then life goes on. She gets a job, very good job, and a lot of relationships. But now we are in the present moment when there is a dilemma. Whom should I choose, Tom or Billy, she says. So here we are today. The father had a diagnosis with bladder cancer a couple of years ago, but that is mentioned only like a side info from her son. So this is the history I was working with, discovering it step by step, and a little bit of transgenerational timeline, because the abuse is, from the digital perspective, Katie understood from the very first moment that her father did to her only what he was taught to do, what he learned to do from his father, and so on. And looking back a little bit in her transgenerational timeline, with red we have unresourceful abusive relations, with green the resourceful relations. Actually, the only resourceful relation that Katie had during her childhood was with the mother's mother, the grandmother. With the mother, the relationship was ambivalent, because sometimes the mother was defending her, sometimes she was hitting her. The relationship between the parents seemed to be good all the time, but with the father, basically this is something that comes from the great-grandfather, who apparently was chasing his grandson with an axe in the courtyard to kill him when he was about 6 years old or so. So the history goes way back, and this will probably become a topic in future intervention in systemic constellations workshop. But for Katie, it was very relevant at a certain point to just understand how this dynamics of abuse went down to her. Understanding is one thing, changing inside the history is a different thing, and this is what we did during our sessions. So, first of all, for me it was a bit difficult, even when I was supervising this case with Peter and Melita, it was a little bit difficult to put an ICD diagnosis or so. It has some traits of PTSD, it has some traits of dissociative disorder, but not really there. So I just focused on our NLPt approach and did our own kind of diagnosis, as we usually do. We start with rapport. Well, in a way, we had a rapport from 5 years ago, because Katie decided she wanted to work with me without consulting other therapists. So in a way, a level of trust, a minimum level of trust was there. On the other hand, her ability to get into rapport with people was very little at the beginning. In therapy, we did a very good agreement from the very first moment, saying, okay, when you don't like something or you are not comfortable with certain interventions that I do, just let me know and we find a way. And she did. There were moments when she said, I'm not comfortable with this. And we were doing some trance exercises in the SCORE model at that moment. Regarding representational assistance, she was mostly visual and digital. Digital with an inner dialogue, especially in conceptualizations, nominalizations. Not so, let's say, critical inner dialogue as I've seen in other patients with similar, let's say, dynamics. But anyway, she needed all the time to understand what is going on in the process and to end with herself. It was like a leitmotiv, like saying, I don't understand why I still think about Tom and I can't get over him. Also in the beginning, she was not in contact with her analog part, with the kinesthetic part, with the kino. Actually, more than this, she said she was feeling numb. So whenever I was asking her, how do you feel in your body? She was like, I don't know, I think, and she starts. That's why, because she feels numb, the tendency, the coping mechanism was to find extraordinary, the extraordinary. Like the relationship with Tom was extraordinary because it was very intense. The passion and the sex on the walls and everything. Also the other activities that she does in her free time. On meta programs, of course she has external reference. Environment is pretty threatening to her. Away from usually, although when she comes to therapy, she displays both away from and towards. And these towards kind of seeing things and putting herself into the goal was what helped her a lot in the process. She's very detail-oriented. Procedure, she wants to know exactly how to do things. And this helped her a lot in building herself the strategies to cope with certain states. And also dissociated. I put this in bold because, as I said before, she is dissociated, but still she did not develop a dissociative disorder. When I remember in the first session, she even told me about the trauma at 7 years old. She was talking about it, let's say, in even more relaxed manner than I told you about it. It was like, some story that she heard, very, very away from it. a lot of complex equivalences, beliefs that are part of her way of seeing the world. And these are the most important which we have to deal with or to approach in the therapy. For instance, sex and communication are the most important things in a relationship. This is something that she learned from her mother. And because Billy was not very good with sex and communication, even if he was so kind and so on, this was one of the reasons that they had issues at a certain moment. So, what we did. So her goal was to be at peace in the new relationship with Billy, which implies to be able to get over Tom. Well, to me it was very clear from the very first moment that we are talking parts. But I was able to introduce the parts idea and the work with parts only in the third session. When she comes again with the topic. Well, I cannot choose. I'm still missing Tom. So, we split the parts. The parts wants to be with Tom. Actually, it was surprising to me. It appeared to be the instance of the 3-year-old girl, full of resources, happy and joyful, and a little bit regressed, emotionally and not only, with a lot of kinesthetic modalities, but with a plus, good kinesthetic modalities. What triggered me, it was, okay, this was the first instance which was accessible to her at that moment. When she mentioned, with Tom I feel protected like my father protected me, for me, I knew already about the trauma, it was immediately a question mark there, something to consider for the next sessions, because, okay, the father protected you, but he also abused you. So, what is what and how are they triggered? Then, the part who wants to be with Billy appeared to be exactly the instance of Katie at 17 years old, who is doing well in high school and is very visual. Although she says, I feel I have everything, it was not a feeling, it was a thought, it was a concept and an image. I see myself with Billy going and doing and building and whatever, very visual. She's trying to give some safety resources to the 3-year-old in a let's say, in a trial to put these two parts in a sort of mediation. It was not really possible at this moment. So we just anchored a little bit the 17-year-old resources, and we went on with the therapy. Between sessions 3 and 8, she brings in the therapy a lot of issues with Billy. Because Billy has his own issues, and sometimes he's not doing well in sex, or sometimes he's not communicating well enough. And Billy is mostly kinesthetic, and Katie is interacting with him from the visual standpoint, right? We see here. Here we are in a situation where she needs to develop some communication strategies, VK type. What should I take into consideration when I'm having Billy around me, who is very tender and I just want to go out and do stuff, and so on. Then between sessions 7 and 8, we had a break for about 1 month because they went to a trip to Nepal. It was apparently Billy's idea to go hiking in Himalaya. And they had this break for 1 month. We had this break for 1 month. And in session 7, she wanted to prepare some strategies how to cope being alone with Billy for such a long time in the middle of the mountains. And then in session 8, she comes back and she says, I cannot do it anymore. I miss Tom. I will break up with Billy. And why? Because Tom, in the meantime, although he got married, he's sending her messages saying, I'm gonna divorce because I miss you. So after session 8, she breaks up with Billy. She's thinking about Tom, and she goes back to Tom. But there comes session 9, where there is a new crisis, because being back with Tom, she realizes that actually what's good for her is Billy. So she breaks up with Tom. The moment when she does that, Tom becomes really aggressive. And apparently it is for the first time when she perceives Tom as aggressive. And actually I was waiting for this moment, in a way. Of course she doesn't understand why. But then she says, well, how do you feel about Tom now? Well, he disappointed me. And when he disappoints me, he's like that to me. So we worked on this complex equivalence. We started from the same part that's related to Tom, the 3-year-old, except that she recognizes now that the 3-year-old is really connected to trauma and to the part who was abused, because now Tom is abusing her. Yes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Oh, okay. Thank you. So, what do you get out of it? So, adrenaline. I'm challenging death. Well, why death? Because, you know, when someone disappoints me the way my father did, then he's dead to me. And here we, for the first time, approached the amnesia part, where she did not remember the traumatic period. And when she visualized that part, she saw a little girl, naked, sick, and skinny, under a blanket, who does not want to get out of there. And because she is so strongly visual, she could work with these images also in her own time, not only during the sessions. And of course, the dynamics of the trauma is a sort of a seduction kind of dynamics. I mean, running away and being pulled back by the same pattern that she used to live with her father in the relationship with Tom. And now it was for the first time when it became clear to her as well that she's basically reliving in a certain way the trauma that she had in relationship with the father. Then we kept on building resources, especially on the minimum trust that she had in the relationship with Granny, and the safety that she feels in relation with Billy. And she told me that whenever Billy is holding her, she got back with Billy every time, of course. The moment that Billy holds her in the evening, when they go to sleep, she says, I'm calling the girls to me. The girls meaning the traumatized little girl and the 17-year-old girl, and she gives them the love that she feels when she is there. She's taking more and more autonomy of her own process. This is something I did not suggest to her. She did it on her own. Then she said she was getting back to the traumatic moment at the 7 years old. So I prepared her, and in session, we had a session of EMDR with the traumatic moment. She could decrease the negative state of trauma from 9 out of 10 to 2 out of 10. So now when she is talking about the moment, she is connected, she is associated, but at the same time, she does not feel the pain or anything else so much, only at level 2. And she changed her negative cognition about herself, that I don't deserve to live because I'm not enough, to I am normal. To her it was something unbelievable to be normal. I'm normal and I deserve to live like anybody else. And then after the MDR, she experienced some depressive states, which you could work in. And this is the moment when, okay, trauma may also be a good friend of yours. So it's not necessary to just bury it or get rid of it, just integrate it. And this is the parts work, increasingly mediating each other and integrating each other. Mostly analog work was done. And sometimes these loneliness feelings, void, and some other feelings that were reconnecting with the 10-year-old or the 17-year-old sometimes pop out, and she learns strategies how to deal with them kinesthetically. At a certain moment, she had a couple of weeks when she was so much compulsively eating that she put on about 7 kilos in 2 weeks. But then she could manage it down. So now she was back with Billy after a week at that moment, the crisis. They moved together. She changed jobs in the meantime. Also, this is a side effect. And what's most important, she doesn't feel the need or think about having contact with Tom anymore. And it's been more than 2 months already, which is first premiere for her. I used some other considerations in working with Katie. First of all, considerations about trauma. And I've been doing some work and trainings with Franz Rupert, and he has this theory of trauma. So when we have a trauma, we split basically into the traumatized part, the survival parts, and of course there are other healthy parts that remain. And there are some characteristics for each of them. The traumatized part usually remain unconscious, and in Katie's case, they are even in the amnesia part. Emotionally, the traumatized parts remain at the age it happened, and we could already see that. And they are triggered suddenly most of the time. Let's see what's going on with Katie. From this point of view, the traumatized part were mostly kinesthetic. She was not in contact with them. She was feeling pain, so whenever she was feeling pain, she was dissociating again. For the survival part, she developed strong visual and inner dialogue, especially visual, with all sorts of strategies to deal with life in general. But then the healthy parts, and many healthy parts, actually she came to therapy from the healthy part, which is a little bit unusual because sometimes, well, I've seen in my experience, many clients come to therapy from the survival part. And that's when sometimes it takes a little bit more time to get it to really work with them because they put a lot of barriers or resistances, as we say. I was also thinking that this kind of trauma, because Katie is such a strong girl and resourceful actually, she had a good start in life before 3 years old actually. This was why probably she did not develop a dissociative disorder, although she may have. What I was thinking is that what she needed most was a witness of her trauma. because she did a lot of the work in between sessions. And the fact that she has a gap in her development for about 4 years, there is a need of reparenting there, which I noticed already in the way she relates to me as her therapist, with a certain level of dependency and a need to understand what is the process and what is going on. And yeah, I know that we speak a lot about how to help our clients to become autonomous as soon as possible, but for the moment, this dependency that she manifests may be really useful in the therapeutic process, thinking also about the reparenting part. I'm her surrogate mother, who was not able at that point to support her, and so on. I have a metaphor for our therapeutic process. It's inspired from the phenomenological aspect, meaning that we really, although we have a therapeutic goal, I really don't know where we are going. It's just having a lantern, and every step we take, a little more light comes around to see what's next. For the future, it remains the relationship with self and building more trust in herself and in life and in general. And probably we'll see after the systemic constellations how the relationship with the father is repositioned, because now she says, I'm very, very well with my father. On the other hand, there is this ambivalence. I'm protected as well as I feel sometimes threatened. What to do next?